My wife gave birth and said it was mine, but the baby looked like my best friend, so I did a DNA test. I was sitting in this dingy bar across from the hospital, staring into a half-empty glass of whiskey. The kind of place where the lights are low, and nobody looks you in the eye. Fitting, considering I didn't want to be seen. My phone was face down on the table, but every time the screen lit up, my heart jumped like it was trying to escape my chest. Tracy was still at the hospital. She had just given birth a few hours ago. Supposedly 6 weeks early. That's what she said. But when I held that baby for the first time, something felt off. He was a full 7 pounds, skin pink and plump, crying like his lungs were well practiced. He didn't look early. He looked ready. And that face. God help me, but I knew that face. Gary. My best friend, my brother from another mother, my ghost. The bartender must have seen the look on my face, because he walked over and refilled my glass without asking. "Rough night?" he muttered. I didn't even answer. Just nodded and slid a crumpled 20 his way. I was waiting on a text from a lab tech I'd paid under the table to fast-track a paternity test. Swabbed the baby while Tracy was in the shower. Felt sick doing it, like I was violating something sacred, but I needed to know. Tracy's been lying for months. About little things at first, where she was going, who she was meeting. Then the timelines didn't add up. She said the baby came early, but she was wearing maternity clothes a month before she should have. When I asked, she acted offended. Said I was accusing her of being fat. We've been married 10 years. We've got 2 kids already, Emily 8 and Zach 6. I thought we were solid. But lately, Trace has been cold. Short with the kids. Always checking her phone, locking it when I walked by. And worst of all, every time Gary's name came up, even just in passing, she'd flinch like she got slapped. Gary died last year. Car crash. I was the one who had to identify the body. I stood in the morgue and looked down at the guy who used to be my best friend. The guy who stood next to me at my wedding, after he and Tracy split up years before. The guy I trusted with everything. If this test came back saying what I already suspected, then Tracy's been carrying his child inside her while pretending it was mine. The phone buzzed. I stared at it for a long time. Like opening it would end life as I knew it. I picked it up. One line. Not a match. My stomach dropped. My ears started ringing. I just sat there, holding the phone, like maybe if I stared long enough, the words would change. They didn't. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life, it cracked. The bar stool started to feel like it was caving in under me. I couldn't breathe right. My hands were shaking, and my mouth was dry as sand. That baby wasn't mine. That baby, that thing I held earlier, who I rocked and kissed on the forehead, thinking he was my son, he wasn't mine. He was Gary's. And Tracy knew. I could see it now. Every weird look, every dodged question, every fake smile. You want to know the worst part? We were all best friends once. Me, Tracy, and Gary, the three amigos. That's what we used to call ourselves in high school. Every birthday, every summer trip, every heartbreak, we went through it together. We were thick as thieves. I had a crush on Tracy back then, but she chose Gary. I didn't even get mad. I mean, it stung, but Gary was my guy. I figured if it wasn't me, I was glad it was him. They dated for a couple years. Then college came, and they split. No big drama, just life pulling them apart. Years later, I bumped into Tracy at a grocery store back in our hometown. She looked different. Softer. Tired in a way that made her feel real. We talked. We kept talking. That turned into coffee, then drinks, then me waking up in her bed wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. She told me she was done with Gary. that he was part of her past. Said I was the one she should have been with. I was dumb enough to believe her. Gary was the best man in our wedding. He gave a toast, smiling the whole time, but looking back, man, there was something in his eyes. Some kind of sadness I didn't notice because I didn't want to notice. Now here I am, in a bar near the hospital, finding out my wife's last baby isn't mine. It's his. You can't make this up. I should have walked out then. I should have gone straight home and packed a bag. But I didn't. I sat there for another hour, phone screen still lit, reading that one damn line over and over again, like it would start to mean something else. Then my phone buzzed again. Tracy, can you pick up some food on your way back? I'm starving, LOL. Love you, Red Heart. LOL. She sent me LOL. She was in that hospital room, holding his baby, texting me to bring her food like everything was normal. Like she wasn't standing on the grave of our marriage and doing a little dance on it. I didn't reply. I just stood up, tossed some cash on the bar, and walked out into the cold night air, wondering how the hell I got here. I didn't go straight to the hospital. I drove around for a while. Windows down even though it was freezing, trying to let the cold snap me out of whatever fog I was in. I must have passed the hospital exit 3 times before I finally turned in. The whole way up to her room, my legs felt like bricks. Elevator ride was silent, except for this old lady with a bouquet who smiled at me. I forced one back, like I wasn't walking into the biggest lie of my life. When I opened the door, Tracy lit up like nothing was wrong. There you are. I was starting to think you bailed on me. She laughed. She was sitting up in bed, holding the baby in her arms. Gary's baby. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was glowing. Not from birth, from getting away with it. I forgot the food, I muttered, standing near the door. She pouted. Aw, seriously? Then she tilted her head, narrowing her eyes, like she just noticed something. You okay? That was the moment. I had the chance to call it out right then and there. Throw the DNA results at her face. Demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Just tired, I said. She smiled again. Come here. He's sleeping. Isn't he beautiful? I didn't move. I couldn't. You really think he came early? I asked, careful, watching her face. Her eyes twitched for a second. A flicker. Then she nodded. Yeah. I mean, 6 weeks isn't that early. And you were a big baby too, remember? I didn't respond. She looked down at the baby. He's got your lips, she said. Bull? That baby looked exactly like Gary. The nose, the chin, the eyes. Spitting image. You sure the due date was right? I asked. She didn't even flinch. What's with all the questions? She said, laughing nervously. You acting like you're not the dad or something. That right there. That smug little laugh. That practiced lie. She knew. She knew I was starting to figure it out, and she was already covering her tracks. I just want to be sure, I said, gripping the chair back by the wall to keep from losing it. She rolled her eyes. Look, babies come when they come. It's not a perfect science. She kissed the baby's forehead. You're being weird, she added. Is this about Gary? Again? That hit me like a punch. Again. Like this was a recurring thing. Like I was the one with the problem. I didn't say a word. I just sat down and stared at the floor while she hummed a lullaby to her dead ex's kid and pretended everything was just fine. We brought the baby home 2 days later. I carried the car seat, silent the whole way. Tracy chatted with the nurse, laughed like she just came back from vacation. When we pulled into the driveway, the kids were waiting at the door with balloons and a messy "Welcome, baby brother" sign. Emily hugged Tracy like her life depended on it. Zach peeked into the car seat, all wide-eyed. "He looks like Uncle Gary," he said. Just said it. Straight up. Tracy froze. I saw her lips twitch like she wanted to say something, but she just smiled and said, "You think so?" That was it for me. That was the moment something inside cracked. I helped carry the baby stuff in, moved around like a robot. My own house felt foreign. I couldn't look at the walls without remembering Gary helping me paint them. Couldn't walk into the living room without seeing the three of us on the couch, watching the game, laughing like idiots. Then I saw it. That damn photo. It was an old picture, me, Tracy, and Gary, from our wedding. It sat on the shelf, just above the TV. Gary in his suit, hand on my shoulder. Tracy in her dress, eyes a little too soft when she looked at him. I grabbed it without thinking. Tracy walked in just then. "Hey, can you?" She stopped mid-sentence. "What are you doing with that?" I held up the frame. "This picture, it's always bothered me. I just never realized why." She crossed her arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I can finally see it now. The way you looked at him. It wasn't just nostalgia or old friends. You never stopped loving him, did you?" Her jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" I snapped. "Because this kid looks just like him, and you've been lying to me for months." She laughed, like I was being dramatic. "You seriously got all this from a baby's face and a picture?" I stepped closer. "No. I got it from a DNA test." Her face dropped. The color drained. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me. I got the test. He's not mine. He never was." She backed up like I slapped her. You tested him? Without telling me?" "Damn right I did. Because I knew you'd lie. Just like you've been doing since this started." She stared at me, breathing hard. Then she looked away. Didn't deny it. Didn't scream. Just said one thing. "It was only once." Only once. I laughed. I actually laughed. Because somehow, that made it worse. Like I was supposed to say, "Oh, only once. Cool, I'll raise your dead ex's kid now. I want you out of this house," I said, voice low. "You and his baby. You can explain to Emily and Zach why Mommy's not living here anymore." Trace's eyes filled up, but I didn't care. I'd been crying inside for days. It was her turn now. She didn't leave right away. Nah, Tracy started crying and begging like clockwork. Said we needed to talk before we made any permanent decisions. Like she hadn't already made hers the second she crawled into bed with Gary. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she kept saying over and over. "It just happened." That line. That tired line. "It just happened." I told her, "You don't accidentally sleep with someone, Tracy. You don't accidentally keep it a secret for 9 months. You don't accidentally lie about the due date or smile in my face while I rubbed your belly thinking that was my kid." She was holding the baby at that point, rocking him like he was some shield she could hide behind. "Please don't do this in front of him." I almost lost it. "Do what? Be honest? Something you haven't done in a long damn time?" She snapped back then. Put the baby in the crib and turned to me, all fire. "You think this is easy for me? You think I haven't been dying inside every day? You think I didn't hate myself the second it happened?" I walked over to her slow, grabbed a folded baby blanket off the dresser, and threw it onto the floor. "Then why'd you keep him?" She didn't answer right away. Just stood there like I'd punched her. "He was part of Gary," she finally said, voice shaking. "And I loved him. And I still miss him every single day. You don't know what it was like for me losing him." I cut her off. "Losing him? Tracy, I carried his casket. I gave the eulogy. I mourned my best friend while you were probably already pregnant with his kid. That shut her up. She sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands like they held all the answers she never gave me. Then, just like always, she switched gears. Soft voice. Teary eyes. Can't we just figure this out? For the kids? We've been through so much. I shook my head. No. You broke this. I gave you 10 years. 2 kids. I gave you my trust, and you spat on it. Then I told her flat out, I was calling a lawyer. We were done. And no, I wasn't raising that baby. Not mine, not my problem. She got up, stormed out of the room crying, muttering about how I was heartless and throwing everything away over one mistake. One mistake. She called it a mistake like she tripped over a coffee table. Like this wasn't a full-on betrayal built on lies, guilt, and a whole lot of hiding. I stood there in the hallway alone, listening to her sob behind the bathroom door, and I felt nothing but cold. This wasn't my wife anymore. This was someone else. Word got out faster than I expected. Maybe Tracy told someone, or maybe people just have that sixth sense when things go sideways in someone else's life. Either way, by the end of the week, I started getting texts. Her sister, her mom, even one of our neighbors, all asking, "Hey, everything okay?" with that fake concern baked in. I ignored them. But then, Gary's mom called. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. She left a voicemail. Just one line. I need to see you. I couldn't ignore that. When I got to her place, she didn't even say hello. Just opened the door and hugged me like I was her own son. For a minute, I let myself fall into that. Then she stepped back and said, "You found out, didn't you?" I froze. She sat down on the couch, motioned for me to join her. "Tracy called me. Said things were bad. Said you knew the baby wasn't yours." I sat down across from her, dead silent. She looked me right in the eye. "I told Gary to leave her alone." That hit like a gut punch. "What do you mean?" I asked. She sighed. "After you and Tracy got married, Gary still had feelings. He told me he couldn't stop thinking about her. I told him to let it go, that it was wrong. But he was stubborn. Said he never got closure. Said he just wanted to talk to her. So he went behind my back?" I asked. She nodded. "I didn't know how far it went." "Not until the funeral. Tracy came up to me, crying. She said she thought the baby might be Gary's. That she didn't know what to do." I stared at her. "And you didn't think to tell me?" She looked ashamed. "I thought she was just grieving. That maybe she was confused. I didn't want to believe my son did that to you." I stood up. "He did do that. They both did. And now I'm left picking up the pieces while she cries in the bathroom and plays the victim." She didn't defend them. Just sat there, quiet, eyes heavy. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "You didn't deserve any of this." I left without saying anything else. I didn't trust myself to talk. On the way home, I stopped at the park, the one where we used to take the kids. I sat on the same bench Gary and I once shared when we talked about our messed up lives. Funny how the people who say they'd never hurt you end up doing the most damage. And now I had a lawyer's number in my pocket. I hadn't called yet, but I would. Because this wasn't just about me and Tracy anymore. This was about truth, and finally giving it the daylight it deserved. I came home that night to a quiet house. The kids were asleep. Tracy was sitting at the kitchen table, eyes puffy, her phone in front of her like she'd been staring at it for hours. She didn't look up when I walked in. Didn't say a word. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter. She finally spoke. "Your mom called me today." I didn't answer. I just kept sipping. She said she was sorry for what I'm going through. Her voice cracked a little, like she wanted me to feel bad for her. I walked over, leaned on the chair across from her. You going around looking for sympathy now? Tracy looked up, eyes red. You act like I planned this. Like I wanted this. I tilted my head. You slept with him, Tracy. You lied for months. Then you tried to let me raise his kid without saying a word. So yeah, feels kinda planned. She started crying again. Always crying. But it didn't hit me like it used to. I felt like I was watching someone else's life, not mine. I didn't know I was pregnant when he died, she whispered. I was scared. I thought if I just kept quiet, maybe the baby would look like you, maybe the timing would work out. Maybe it'd go away. Did you love him? I asked. Blunt. No emotion left to soften it. She nodded, slow and guilty. I never stopped, she said. I tried to. I married you. I wanted to move on. But every time we were all together, it just burned behind your eyes. I finished for her. She nodded again, wiped her face. I stood up. You know what gets me the most? You looked me in the face, day after day, and kept that lie alive. You let me get excited about a baby. Let me talk to him through your stomach. I was planning his whole future, and you just sat there. I didn't know how to stop, she whispered. You didn't want to. I shot back. You were getting everything. You had me, the kids, and a piece of Gary to keep for yourself. I was just your damn cover. She broke then, full sobbing, hands on her face, shoulders shaking. I didn't flinch. I just grabbed my car keys, turned toward the stairs. I'm sleeping in the guest room. Tomorrow we talk custody. And then a lawyer. Right before I walked out of the kitchen, she choked out one more line. I ruined everything, didn't I? I didn't turn around. You ruined me. The next morning hit like a hammer. I didn't sleep. Just stared at the ceiling of the guest room, wondering how much of my marriage had been fake. Wondering if I missed the signs because I didn't want to see them, or because I trusted her that much. I heard the kids get up before sunrise. The pitter-patter of little feet, some quiet giggles, the TV clicking on. For a second, I smiled. Then I remembered. I got up, splashed water on my face, and walked into the kitchen. Emily was pouring cereal for Zach. She looked up and blinked twice. Why are you wearing your work pants on a Saturday? Kids always notice the little things. The ones that feel harmless until they aren't. Tracy came down a few minutes later, looking like hell. Hoodie, no makeup, hair tied in a bun, like the version of her from before everything fell apart. She walked in, saw me at the table with the kids, and froze. You sleep okay? She asked. Voice low, trying to sound normal. I didn't answer. I just kept buttering Zach's toast. Emily looked between us. Why is Mommy sleeping alone now? Trace's eyes welled up instantly. I jumped in before she could speak. Me and Mommy just need to talk about some grown-up stuff. That's all. Zach, mouth full of cereal, looked up and said, Did you guys fight 'cause the baby looks like Uncle Gary? I dropped the knife. Tracy gasped. Zach! He just shrugged. He does. Emily put her spoon down, quietly. We're not dumb, Mommy. We hear things. Tracy started crying right there at the table. She reached for Emily's hand, but she pulled it back. Are you and Daddy getting a divorce? She whispered. I had no idea what to say. Tracy opened her mouth like she was going to lie again, but I cut her off. We're figuring things out. But no matter what happens, we both love you and your brother more than anything. Emily didn't say a word. She just picked up her bowl and walked off. Zach followed her. And just like that, the damage hit. Not just to me. Not just to her. but to them. The people who didn't ask for any of this. The ones who had to grow up a little faster because of someone else's secrets. Tracy looked at me, tears streaking her cheeks. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't even look at her. You can't. A few days passed. I moved into my buddy Paul's place, just for now. Tracy stayed in the house with the kids. I didn't want to uproot them more than they already were. But every time I saw their faces, I saw a little less innocence. A little more weight in their eyes. I met with the lawyer. Told him everything. The affair. The paternity test. My decision not to raise the baby. He nodded, said this wasn't the first time he'd heard something like it, that part stung more than it should have. That night, Tracy texted me. Can we talk? Just the two of us. I didn't want to. But part of me needed to. Not for her. For me. I told her to meet me at that park near the house. The same one we used to bring Emily and Zach to when they were toddlers. I got there first. Sat on a bench under the oak tree. Cold air. Empty swings creaking. Then she showed up, holding a stupid little bouquet. Wildflowers. The same kind she picked on our first hike together. Like that was supposed to erase everything. I didn't come to fight, she said softly, handing me the flowers. I didn't take them. She sat beside me anyway. I've been seeing a therapist, she said, trying to understand why I did what I did. I didn't say a word. I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me. I know that now. I finally looked at her. Why now? Why not back then, when it actually mattered? She swallowed hard. I think I liked the attention. Being wanted. Even if it was wrong. Even if it meant hurting you. I told myself I could fix it before it got out of hand, but I didn't. That's the thing, I said. You thought you had time. You thought I'd just keep loving you through it. She started crying again. I'd seen so many tears from her lately. They stopped meaning anything. I want to try to earn your forgiveness, she said. Even if we're not together. I stood up. Shoved my hands in my pockets. Looked at the same old swing Zach used to fall off every time he got too excited. Forgiveness doesn't mean what you think it does. I'm not carrying this hate around forever, Tracy. But that doesn't mean we go back. It just means I'll stop letting it burn me. She looked up at me. So, this is really it? I nodded. It was at the moment you decided I wasn't enough. She sat there, flowers in her lap, trying to keep her face from crumbling. I walked off without another word. That night, I threw out the wedding album. But I kept the pictures with the kids. They're the only part of this story that still feels real. It's been 3 weeks since that night at the park. The house isn't mine anymore. Not really. I signed the temporary agreement with the lawyer, and Tracy's staying there with the kids. I get them every other weekend and Wednesday nights. It's not perfect, but it's something. The baby, Gary's baby, I don't ask about him. I don't hold him. I don't say his name. He's not my responsibility. That sounds harsh, I know. But I gave my soul to a woman who chose someone else while sleeping in my bed, while letting me believe we were building a family. You don't come back from that. The worst part? It's not even the cheating. It's not the lying. It's not the kid. It's that I met every promise I made, and she didn't. I still see the kids, and we're trying to build a new rhythm. They're confused. Emily asks why I can't stay the night sometimes. Zach keeps drawing pictures of us all in the same house, like it's still a dream he can make real. I tell them the truth, the gentle kind. That families look different sometimes, but love doesn't go away. They believe me. I hope one day they understand the rest. As for Tracy, she texts sometimes. Updates. Apologies. Offers to bring the kids over so we can all be together. I don't reply. I've said everything I needed to say. You see, there's a kind of freedom in finality. In walking away. I didn't choose to be betrayed. But I'm choosing what comes next. And what comes next is mine. Not hers. Not his. Mine. Thanks for listening. I don't know what this post is. A vent, a goodbye, a warning. Maybe all three. But if you're reading this and you've ever been betrayed like I have, just know. You can survive it. You can walk away. And yeah, it'll hurt like hell. But you'll still be standing when the smoke clears. Just like I am now.